want to thank Julia and a troublemaker named John Taylor. They're right over this glamorous couple right over here. For their friendship, their graciousness, and of course their generosity in underwriting this season's conversations. As you may recall, this year our theme is the lovely topic, the 7 deadly sins. Today's theme is lust. We couldn't help it. And what better topic it is for our Cindy to begin our program.
Okay. Well, welcome back to the 7 deadly sins. Today we're happy to say we've moved away from greed to an earthly sin, an all-round favorite, the sin of lust.
Yay!
Which we will examine. It's a very popular sin, which we'll examine in art, a much more delightful topic.
Let's remember Dan's here. Let's all look at Dan. Hi, Dan.
You may learn something if you stay.
Not touching that one. And we all recognize why lust is such a crowd pleaser. The Cambridge Dictionary tells us that lust is intense longing, usually connected to passionate or unbridled sexual desire. The word lust comes from the Latin luxuria, meaning sexual excess, leading to all kinds of topics like fornication, rape, bestiality, and other sinful acts. That could be the whole, we could just talk about that for the whole, my 30, 40 minutes. But none other than the 13th century philosopher priest Thomas Aquinas considered lust as, quote, an abuse of faculty that humans share with animals and sins of the flesh. And they're less grievous, are you ready, than spiritual sins. So we've got that covered. It's not as bad as a spiritual
Anything
sin.
is better than Sackler last month, I swear to God.
True. Okay, please change the slide. Okay. Now we're beginning our journey of lustful images by looking at a 16th century engraving from the Met in New York. Not the opera, the museum. And this is illustrating lust based on a drawing by that famous Northern Renaissance artist, Peter Bruegel the Elder, not to be confused with the younger. And by the way, this was copied by another artist whose name is on the screen, Peter van der Heyden. I didn't want to confuse you all with all these Peters, but by the way, okay, watch it. She won't even give me 5 minutes without interrupting.
I can't help it.
I know, she can't
There's
help
so
it.
many potential puns.
I know,
I'm
she's
trying so hard.
We haven't even. Oh, God. I just wanted to point out that copying another artist was a common practice since early Renaissance days, and even someone like a Raphael was copied all the time. People would engrave works after an engraving being a work on paper, would copy from a painting, and that's how some of these engravers became very rich and successful. So right off the bat, we notice this work reeks of Bruegel's fellow Dutchman, Hieronymus Bosch. I'm sure many of you know The Garden of Earthly Delights and all the strange and wild and crazy images on it. And Bosch's surreal landscapes and his creepy hybrid figures, flying creatures, and strange goings-on. I mean, it's just, I'm going to give you a close-up in a minute. Not that you really asked for it, but you're going to get it anyway. They really populate most of the picture plane, and it's so strange and disturbing, this scene of chaos. And that we don't really know what to look at first because there's so many areas that are screaming, "Look at me!" But we can't tear our eyes off this work. It's that bizarre. It's kind of like when you see people following the fire trucks or following the police. You just can't. I know there's a word for it. But don't worry, we're not going to linger too long. Okay, let's move to the next, please. So this is smack in the middle of the scene. We encounter this allegorical female nude figure being caressed by a demon lover wearing a clerical head covering with the scaly legs in the hollow of a ripped out tree trunk. Notice not only that, he sticks his slithery tongue inside her mouth. Really it's so disgusting. Notice his sharp clawed feet, mimicked by the proud cock who's standing, okay, I'm waiting for you, standing on the top of his chair, and her outstretched leg that's being pecked by the creature whose beak is getting ready to strike again. It's just this strange, this hybrid, these strange creatures abound, and everywhere we look, their depravity is reigning. One more. And then adjacent to the left of the tree trunk, we see a procession where an adulterous man riding on the back of a demon with a dragon head, and he's naked. And of course, when we say naked, that implies shame as opposed to nude, which implies, Greco-Roman, figures that are classical in their style. So this guy's naked because, he's got a lot of baggage to be sorry about. And the man is wearing a bishop's hat or mitre on his head with a prescribed punishment written on the mitre. And some in the crowd that are shaming him carry switches. And just as a little context, don't worry, more lust is in your viewing pleasure in a minute. But this is the time in the history of the Counter-Reformation, and Spain was fighting Holland Catholicism was fighting Protestantism, and that would be a really interesting talk too, art-wise. But suffice it to say that like Bosch, Bruegel was Catholic, and this work would have been a lesson in the sin of lust. Now, let's move along. We've got way more great things to show. Now, we're setting the stage for some first-class lust by looking at a painting from a series of 6 paintings, and it's called, are you ready, Marriage a la mode. I mean, when you hear a la mode, what do you think of? Pie with some ice cream, right? And marriage a la mode, interpreted then, was marriage of the day, or modern marriage, by the great 18th century painter, British satirist and moralist William Hogarth. And Hogarth, who, like Flaubert, and we will get to Stacey eventually if you're patient, Hogarth, like Flaubert, did with like what Flaubert did with Madame Bovary in literature, Hogarth did with this kind of painting, because both of them were poking fun at the aristocracy, and they poked fun at contemporary life. Hogarth was trained as an engraver, and follow me carefully, his favorite method was to work in a sequence, like chapters in a book or scenes in a play. So these paintings were specifically designed to be followed, because what would happen is that once they were painted, he would have engravings made of the images, and they would sell for like a set of 6 would sell for a guinea. Now, I mean, some of you really are knowledgeable about British coinage. Just want to throw this little tidbit out, that 1 guinea was equal to 21 shillings. But the point being that this was the time, right around the time of the Industrial Revolution, and there was a growing middle class in Britain, and so the middle class wanted art, and this was the kind of art, the engravings, not the paintings. So Marriage a la mode is a tale of an unloving, unfortunately unlovable couple who were forced into marriage by their greedy fathers. One was a gentleman with a title. He was an earl, and no money, because he'd spent it all building his new Palladian mansion. And the other, which was unfinished, and the other was a rich alderman who coveted the title. And so we're looking at the first painting in the series, and you're wondering where's the lust. We'll get to it in a minute. I wanted to show you the first painting because it kind of gives you the context of the cast of characters and the setting, and I wanted in particular for you to see the most unhappy couple. They're on the left, And I wanted to point out that the dissolute groom-to-be has a very prominent black circle just below the jawline, which sadly is not a birthmark. And rather, it's the mark of one who spent too many hours in a Parisian brothel. Yes, and more on that later. Next to him is the pathetic pawn in her father's desire to be titled, the young bride-to-be in her father's, and the gentleman leaning into her is her father's loquacious attorney named Silvertongue. You've got to love all these names. On the other side of the painting-filled room, are you beeline for the Medusa? There are paintings within the painting. One of them happens to be the Medusa, which of course is a very ominous sign to have in your drawing room. And it's, I don't know if you can hardly see it. It's kind of oval-shaped up there. Anyway, on the other side of the painting of the room sits the young man's father. His name is the Earl of, are you ready, Squanderfield, whose ancestry he's holding, and it displays a scroll with a tree trunk prominently placed where one would find his ancestors' maleness. And the male in the picture on the scroll is none other than William the Conqueror, because he is the progenitor of the Squanderfield line, or so they say. Plagued with gout, the Earl is only too happy to see the money bags piled up on this table. And you notice that there is a big mansion outside the window adjacent to him, indicating that he needs the cash to finish the construction. All right, so now we're getting to the really good stuff. Do you think? Yeah, please. Okay. So here we have the second in the series, and this is the breakfast scene, or tete-a-tete. We're still in marriage a la mode. We don't have time to look at all six, but this is the breakfast scene, implying that there is a conversation. Of course, there isn't a conversation. Hogarth continued to refine his morality play, displaying how absolutely wretched, how terrible this union is. We're in the drawing room of this, quote, fine mansion. That remains to be, that's debatable. We'll talk about that in a second. Where we find that both of the protagonists, now they've been married, the fathers sealed the deal previously. And not only these protagonists are there, but it looks like they've been up all night long. I mean, literally all night long, and gotten into a lot of trouble. And they were doing it separately. They haven't been up together all night long.
I'd like to transport you and Cindy back to 1856. Okay, you have just read in a literary magazine, the Revue de Paris, the very last installment of Madame Bovary. And as a member of the French bourgeoisie, you are appalled. Why? At that time, literature was expected to provide entertainment. Bovary was not entertaining. Okay? Literature was to celebrate the ideal. Bovary exposed the mundane, the commonplace, and the everyday. Literature was supposed to provide moral instruction. Bovary explored and elaborated on the taboo. Literature reflected society's values. It glorified chivalry. It celebrated the individual. Bovary mocked the individual, exposed the hypocrisy baked into society. All along, narrated with an aloof voice, a scientific voice, sometimes adding a bit of cheeky narration. How dare Flaubert? I'll say it again. This was a slap in the face. Now, although the times they were changing, according to Bob Dylan, Gustave Flaubert serialized a story about a dissatisfied wife who cheats repeatedly on her husband to satisfy her need for lust, and also engages in serious rounds of retail therapy. The whole thing went way too far. Readers could not tolerate a woman who dared to break the rules and show zero remorse. She chased lust into bed.
Hallelujah.
And when she couldn't land her lovers in a bed, a rocking horse with a buggy could do.
Do you want to move to your slides?
Oh, do you want to do
No,
that?
I think you should go.
Okay. Lisa, do you want to move to, I do have some book covers. That's really all I've got. So you got to kind of, use your imagination, as one does. Okay, in this topic.
Keep going.
Okay, so, yes. And when her lovers
There we
left
go.
her, yeah, that's good, Lisa. Thanks. And I'll holler. Okay. And when their lovers left her,
You want me to?
and the spoiler is they all do, she also lands back in bed to cry, to ruminate, to give birth, to reconsider, and ultimately terminate her life. Cindy is going to show you the importance of the bed and what it represents metaphorically in art. Flaubert uses the bed as motif in the story of Bovary. So by the time that you had reached the end of the serialized story, you would have been nodding your head along with your friends as you visited in the salons and the drawing rooms, as you passed one another on the Haussmann Boulevard. You'd be quite satisfied about the recent news that you had just read in the paper. That pornographer Flaubert, along with that appalling publisher, would soon be tried in court, sued by the government for printing such an unacceptable story about a woman motivated by lust. So what made society exactly so hot and bothered? Let's get under the covers of the book and find out. Next slide, please. One more. There's your bourgeoisie. And here we go. Let's meet Emma, the lusty-busty star of our story. When we meet her, her name is Emma Rual, a young woman I kind of envision like you see a pastoral Scarlett O'Hara. And this woman is trapped. Our Emma lives in the French countryside with her dad, and she is bored out of her skull. And like most of us, Lisa, next slide, Emma escapes through reading. After all, there is a reason why Danielle Steele, Barbara Cartland, and Harlequin books that I call Blue Lagoon in theme, next slide, Lisa, are highly profitable. In fact, I looked this up, 50 Shades of Grey alone has sold over 150 million copies worldwide, earning millions of dollars of royalties for the author and its publisher. Clearly, I'm in the wrong genre here. And that amount does not take in the films, right? So these books satisfy the romantics and they satiate the lusty. We can't be too judgmental of our farm girl, Emma, or at least I can't, because I've been there myself. Next slide, Lisa. Lost in reading about David Cassidy and Bobby Sherman and the Osmonds, and reading books like Judy Blume's Forever and Deanie. These books, these were escapes, right? Jody's nodding her head. She's been there. So quote, Emma longed for a man to arise, strong, beautiful. a valiant king, like those of yore, to whom she could give herself up, and who could carry her away on his horse to his castles in the mountains. Well, I don't know about you. I mean, this is the cheeky part of Flaubert, okay? I am sure some of you can also relate to these flights of fancy, but Emma engineers a kind of tunnel vision. Too much scrolling. She becomes bent on pursuing a fanciful romantic life at all costs, ignoring the maxim of moderation is key, right? And falling prey to a deadly sin, although not the worst. Like the second-rate sin, right, the second-rate sin. Okay, Lisa, next slide. Her first conquest is in her desire for passion and excitement. She decides to marry the first man that comes along with a pulse. And he is a country doctor, Charles Bovary. She's the dominatrix of this relationship from the start, okay? The first word she speaks in the novel, like we are a few chapters in at this point, right? They're to Charles, and it's a double entendre. Are you looking for something? Poor Charles has lost his riding crop. Emma finds it. His desire for her is ignited. He's pulled by this bit. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. I tried so hard. Okay. But the thrill to capture Charles quickly fades. And then she begins to regret her decision. Quote, before her wedding day, she thought she was in love. But since she lacked the happiness that she thought should have come with this love, she must have been mistaken. But Emma goes through with her wedding. Okay, how awful, right? But in 1856, that's a good thing. Okay, but she a little bit ignores what you say at the altar. Okay, instead seeking out the fanciful ideas that are found in the pages of romance novels. Quote, Emma sought to find out exactly what was meant in real life by the words passion and rapture, which it seemed so fine on the pages of her books, unquote. As a reader in 1856, this is shocking. A wedded woman should be complacent, should be content, not on the hunt. More shocking, Emma doesn't care. And guess what? After she gets married, she's bored. So it is at a village fair where there's lots of animals, where Emma is attending with her husband. They meet a wealthy country squire of, quote, cynical temperament and keen intellect, unquote. Next slide. Rudolph Boulanger. Okay. You know who I'd cast as Rudolph. Meet Adrian Turner, the star of Poldark. He would be perfect for this role. And P.S., he was also in the recent Agatha Christie rendition, a recent adaptation of And Then There Were None. And this film, it was outstanding. Didn't follow the book. Lousy acting. However, this man is shirtless in several scenes. Okay, so Emma has clearly rubbed off on me. I digress. Anyway, Rudolph, a well-to-do bachelor and owner of a chateau. He is a smooth operator who knows the ladies, and his spidey sense picks up on Emma's malaise, and the entrapment begins. She is an object. She is an object of his desire. Quote, the sight of her rich, taunt breasts beneath her dress, the sound of her voice. You can breathe, Helen. Take a breath. Her soft laughter, all aroused in him 1,000 desires he had never felt before, unquote. Now, of course, Emma is attracted to anything with a sparkle, and Rudolph is a wealthy landowner, he's charming, and he befriends both husband and wife by sending them from his estate large chunks of venison and fowl, lots of raw meat. A flattering invitation follows to invite both Emma and Charles to his chateau. Next slide, Lisa. And while there, showing a pretext for Edna's health because she seems like a fragile flower, he suggests they go riding together. And Charles encourages this. And why shouldn't he? Why would he even think that his wife would be unhappy or have urges? So alone in the woods with frogs plunging into ponds, I know it's ridiculous. He tells us that some force beyond his control drove him to her. Well, Emma recognizes this language of hot, burning love, and she is easy game. Too easy. So come back now to a minute to 2024. And yes, this sounds so incredibly sappy. But remember, in 1856, this was scandalous. A married woman alone with a man in the woods, giving in to her desires. What if your daughters read this book? They could be influenced. Why does Emma show no remorse? Why is she asking for zero forgiveness? Well, the seduction has now commenced. Emma is walking on sunshine. She is gleeful. She is convinced after each tryst that only more will do. Never satisfied with the time they have together, she wants more. I think about Sackler and the oxy and the addiction. However, for Rudolph, the thrill is now gone. He has conquered it. Quote, the charm of newness, slipping down little by little like a garment, revealed unclothed the eternal monotony of passion. Lisa, next slide. Eventually, the best laid plans for an upcoming lusty tryst take a U-turn in the form of a Dear John letter from Rudolph, who explains that he's unexpectedly called away and won't be back. He even manages a fake tear splotch on the letter to give it further authenticity. Crushed, that breakup sends Emma to her bed for one of her many depressive episodes. But don't worry, Emma is not down for long. Next up is Rudolph's foil, Leon Dupuy. This time, Flaubert in a balancing act. It is now Emma who dominates the extramarital affair with a much younger man. A law clerk, Leon is completely infatuated with Emma. She's a real person, a real woman, and she is on a rampage. Lisa, quote, every kiss from her lips left a delicious tingle on his skin. Every embrace filled him with longing. Every caress sent a shiver of pleasure down his spine. This is really as explicit as the sexual scenes get. There is no climactic squealing. There are no graphic positions ever explained. But again, think back to 1856. Readers blame Flaubert for whatever their own imagination sexually concocted. Her affection for Leon fueled by anger to Rudolph. Leon is putty in her hands and the recipient of increasingly lewd, outlandish lovemaking. Her intense wanderlust is more like anger lust. And poor Leon, he just doesn't get it. He eventually leaves town, going off to school in Paris, encouraged by his mama to make the change. Crushed again, a return to crying bouts in bed, comatose states of depression rack our Emma. To cheer her up, her brilliant husband, the doctor, brings Emma to Rouen for the opera. She's a fan. And it is there that they run into Leon. Lisa, go ahead. Circumstances call for Charles to return home the next day. And again, he encourages Emma, stay. You should stay. Maybe Leon can cheer you up. You better believe it. In a famous scene, Leon hails a cab for the couple. They enter. He tells the driver to take them anywhere. And then he and Emma disappear inside. The driver takes them to various tourist destinations. How about now? How about now? How about now? Keep going, Lisa, keep going. Every time he tries to stop, they yell, keep going, not here, not yet. The implication is clear. We are whipped into a frenzy as Emma is on fire again. Now she is lying to her husband because she needs money for piano lessons. And with this money, she funds her frequent hotel trysts with Leon. Further fueled by the fantastic love affairs, she goes on spending sprees. It seems that everyone in town knows who she's spending money on. Everyone except Charles. So let's just pause and remember, Emma does share a bed with her husband, who I would, next slide, suitably cast as Bob Newhart. There was no one else. From the beginning of the novel, Flaubert characterizes Charles as dull, dim, graceless, and look, I loved Bob Newhart. This is nothing against him. The narrator notes. The narrator hopes that the narrator says his conversation was flat as a sidewalk on the street. His name suggests Bovary, a bovine, cud-chewing personality. He isn't physically inept. He isn't incapable of sight. But my God, this man is blind. Charles seems to go through life making his medical rounds in the country every day, returning each night to the hearth and moving over his incredible luck to find such the perfect wife. Suffice to say, he is a wet noodle. You'd think he had some redeeming quality, but he's even a lousy surgeon. Our author goes into great detail explaining a surgery on a young boy's club foot. The post-op is horrible, and eventually the leg needs to be amputated. Charles is very good at sticking his head in the sand when it comes to his angel Emma, ignoring the manic spending binges and the overt attention to other men. And Emma does not hide any of this, by the way, and he has no idea who she is. Yet he's loyal, even after he discovers that she has been seeing Rudolph and Leon and has drained the Bovary bank account of every single, I don't know, what is it there? Centime? Something like that. Every euro, whatever it was. Frank, thank you, Frank. Okay. So the last part of our book, Lisa, go ahead and we can change to this. Yeah. The last part of our book reveals the consequences of pursuing a lust-driven life. In a moment of clarity, a clear vision of the financial, moral, and social ruin that Emma has brought about her family. Did I mention she was the mother of a young little girl named Bertha? She makes a decision. And ultimately, thank God none of you are still eating lunch. One of the most
hoping that would happen.
In one of the most famous scenes, Flaubert describes Emma's demise. Overwhelmed, she stuffs her mouth with a powdery white substance, arsenic, that kills her. Her last posthumous utterance is a black liquid that streams out like vomit from between her lips as her husband and bystanders watch helplessly. Quote, her jaws opened wide, stiffened and trembled, and the death rattle, a deep continuous sound like the unrolling of a spool, came from her throat, unquote. Emma lay there, supine in her bed, exiting her reality, leaving her soul, leaving her body in a pile of her own vomit. The cost of lust is too high. Sadly, Charles, blind by love, he's also drained from life, dying the following year. This is a cautionary tale. In fact, Henry James described Gustave Flaubert as a cautionary tale. And Flaubert said, Madame, c'est moi. I am Madame Bovary. Lisa, you can go ahead, last slide. Looking back from this immoral debris field, Flaubert also tells us another tale in tandem with Emma. The entire cast of characters, they're caricatures. I'm sorry we can't meet them all right now, but actually there is an awful character who is a pharmacist / chemist, which ties us right back to Sackler. I have PTSD.
You definitely do.
And each of them represent the materialism and moral decay, as Cindy mentioned earlier, of 19th century French society. All these people expose the same themes of the consequences of desire. So Madame Bovary is actually a 2-for-1. It's a tale of lust consequences on both the personal and societal level. So Cindy asked me, why would this man write this book? So a look into his bio will answer that question. And then hopefully we can see all the good images that Cindy has, because it's some good stuff. Flaubert was born in Normandy in 1821. His father, Lisa, you can flip to the next slide. His father was a senior surgeon, so that explains all the medical stuff, and head of the largest hospital in Rouen. His mother was described as glacial and cold. He grew up around medicine, playing among cadavers. They actually lived in the hospital at one point. He lives his entire life as a member of the privileged bourgeoisie. He finds them disgusting. He mocks them. He can't stand the smugness, the prudery, the pretension, the provinciality, the jingoism, the unthinking patriotism, and the nationalism. As a young kid, he and a friend kept a running list of, quote, stupid concepts that make people think they're smart, unquote. Can you imagine if he listened to our cable news today? He poured all this contempt into every future character in Madame Bovary. At the age of 20, he registers for law school in Paris, but he fails his second-year exams. He has a nervous attack. We don't know. It could be epilepsy. So at the end of his law studies now, he leaves Paris, a city he never really liked, surprise, and he returns to Rouen. But no matter, his destination was sealed at the age of 17, where he said, quote, art is superior to everything, unquote. We do like
I do love that.
We do. Writing is Flaubert, and Flaubert is writing. And because he's well off, he is unbeholden to write for a living. Instead, his motivation is to write for the ages, find the exact word, the perfect pairing of sentences. He believed there was no such thing as a synonym. Oh my God. Okay. 1 year, he wrote 90 words. The whole year. It is a shame that I cannot appreciate the original French version of this book, so I must rely on translated versions. This is my third time reading this, and every one is a different translation, and I love them all. Having means he travels throughout Europe and the Middle East, all the while mingling with the ladies, mingling with the men, contracting syphilis when he gets to Beirut. Throughout his life, he has reoccurring chronic, painful, gonadic conditions that I'd rather not mention.
You just wanted to say the word gonadic.
I like that word gonadic. In fact, I do believe I've made it up. But anyway.
For which there is no synonym.
That was brilliant.
That was, Susan.
I believe this would make anyone cynical, living in this condition. Next slide, Lisa. A devotee to brothels, he never marries. He only has one serious relationship with a poet named Louise. He never has kids. In a letter to her, he writes, quote, I would transmit to no one the aggravations of the disgrace of existence, unquote. But he certainly transmits some other things, doesn't he? He's a realist. He likes transactional relationships, and his critique of society and language is society is clear in any language. He said, quote, the bourgeoisie is for me something unfathomable. He didn't just think people were dumb. He wanted to show the consequences of stupidity. Charles turning a blind eye to Emma's adultery. Emma's belief that Rudolph would actually run away with her. Society's approval of married men's affairs, but not married women's affairs. The hypocrisy of it all. And although he really does want to write a novel about the past, it is a story in an 1849, it is an article he sees in an 1849 Journal Rouen newspaper that serves as a catalyst for our masterpiece Bovary. Lisa, go ahead and switch. The article talks about a suicide that involved one of Flaubert's father's medical students. The student's wife, whose name was Delphine, was not happily married. She was known to sleep around, okay? But she ends up committing suicide, ingesting cyanide. The story becomes public. A year later, her husband dies. Although Flaubert says, Madame Bovary, c'est moi, I am betting Delphine is Emma, too. It's just too familiar. So 6 years later, we come full circle as a reader in 1856, being shocked at what we've read in the literary journal Revue de Paris. And Flaubert was surprised by our reaction. He thought he wrote a story about Madame Bovary as a cautionary tale and a cynical look at society, the trappings of the bourgeois. And he felt he knows because he's one of them. But, crossed the line, way too many. Next slide. So in 1857, Flaubert and his publisher appear in court after the series wrapped, with the French government bringing charges against Flaubert and the publisher of obscenity and offending public morality. The prosecution argued that the book I just explained to you, its portrayal of adultery, Emma's romantic escapades, and the depiction of bourgeois life were scandalous and morally corrupting. During the trial, though, they read excerpts from the book. That just makes me laugh. They even had witnesses talk about, the impact on them. Flaubert argued that he was depicting reality as it existed. This was never done in literature before this, okay? He emphasized the artistic integrity of writing and its exploration of the complexities of human nature. Brand new. No one's ever done this. Flaubert and his publisher were acquitted. It also helped tremendously, this trial, with book sales. So now a book is published in 1857, that has now the whole book in it. And Lisa, next slide. Who does he dedicate the book to? His attorney. every attorney in this room should just say vindication. All right, but seriously, this book propelled Flaubert to fame and solidified Madame Bovary as a classic. The trial also highlighted something familiar to us today: the tension between artistic freedom and censorship. The court ruled that while the novel did contain elements that were offensive, it didn't exceed the boundaries of artistic expression. Okay? So it sets a precedent, resulting in greater artistic freedom that we enjoy today. It also established the concept that literature is art, and it deserves legal protection, hence the term art for art's sake. The last slide, Lisa. The high price for lust cost Emma her life. It probably cost Flaubert some serious attorney's fees and court costs. But good literature, look at me, good literature is worth fighting for. It was the exactitude of his writing, the precise words. His style is considered modernist, realist. He didn't consider himself either. It is praised by literati throughout every literature landscape. Julian Barnes, Jean-Paul Sartre. There's too many to mention here. Proust, Nabokov, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The critic James Wood says that novelists should thank Flaubert the way poets thank spring. It all begins with him. There was a time before Flaubert and a time after Flaubert. It's hard to have a fresh look at the familiar, right? But I hope today we can understand the shock and then the awe of now when it comes to Madame Bovary, our lustful literary selection for literature's deadly sins. Cindy.
Seriously. Okay, one more. Wait,
There it is.
yeah, okay.
Getting back to the stage.
Seriously. I don't know about you all. I feel like I need to go take a shower.
Look, I have many here.
That was quite a presentation, and I have to admit that you've changed my mind about Madame Bovary.
That's a big deal.
I really, when she picked it, I thought,
Oh, it was such a phase.
I was just so disappointed. I thought, Madame Bovary, I read that in my senior year in college. And
Oh, I'm so glad you just said yuck and didn't say disappointed you. Can you imagine disappointing Cindy? Can you imagine, John?
no.
Can you imagine?
I just thought there's nothing redeeming about that woman. But anyway, you certainly, yeah, she died. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so where were we? We were in 18th century. We were in the parlor where I was going to show you the wet spot on her dress. Go a couple more. Just keep going. No, you're going backwards now. Do you see the stain on the middle of her dress? Honestly, before, they didn't teach me this at Vanderbilt. It's not a bad slide. It really, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, the other point I want to make about this particular detail is that she's holding a mirror in her hand. And some people think that it's a sign to warn the paramour that she's been, shall we say, having a great time with that night. To get out of the room. My husband's come home. And let's go to the next one, the close-up of the guy. So the young Viscount, he of the Squanderfields, has been out all night himself, drinking, gambling, and womanizing. Now, how can we tell? How can we tell this? Well, he's bored out of his mind, and we notice he's got the slouchy pose, and his legs are open wide, and there's a yippy little Bowser who's interested in a protrusion in his pants pocket. And it turns out the bulge is a lady's hat, possibly a conquest from a brothel. And Hogarth alludes, you're going to love this, and you can't make this stuff up. Hogarth alludes to the Viscount's sexual power or lack thereof as he paints the groom's sword that's lying down by his feet, which is still in its scabbard. Is that in the detail?
Oh,
Yeah,
it certainly is.
Okay. The tip is broken. Okay. One other observation being, of course, the black spot on the jaw, like on the jawline. We've already learned of his contracting syphilis prior to the marriage. Later in the series, it becomes apparent that he gives it to the young bride, who carries an unborn child. The young little girl is born also with the syphilis mark, and so no one is immune from this kind of wanton, dissolute lifestyle. So can we go back to the slide with the whole? Go backwards, yeah, right there. And we can't leave the image before remarking on the false piety of the lusty duo. This is their card room in the back on the right, and if you look carefully, you'll see 3 vertical paintings within the painting, and they're saints. Isn't that nice? It's very lovely. But can you see to the right, immediately to the right, there's a painting that's covered by a curtain. All right, there's a curtain, and the image that we can see is a naked foot that is lying on a bed, and it's protruding into our space. It's an image so vulgar, that's why it had to be covered, but it was viewed as an indication of lust, because during the time, you better not interrupt me, an ankle was seen as an aphrodisiac. So you've got this figure, we've got these 3 religious figures, and then you've got this ankle that's exposed, representing lust. So, and then can we go one more?
You have to say, I won't say it, but you have to say it.
I'm not saying it, no, you're going backwards.
Okay, ankle-disiac.
That's why I wouldn't say it. Okay, next, keep going. Keep going, one more. Okay, and we can't leave this wonderful world without mentioning the dubious taste these 2 possess. It's evidenced by their mantle decorations. It's a mixed tableau of objects such as jars and figurines, statues resembling goblins and ghouls, what you'd see on Halloween, and candlesticks that resemble male body parts. And then you have this sour-faced classical sculpture with a broken nose. What kind of aristocrat would have a sculpture with a broken nose, in the middle of their mantle? Well, anyway, these were, and many of the knickknacks have barely disguised sexual connotations. Take a look at the framed winged Cupid playing bagpipes. Whenever you see bagpipes in a painting, like at this time, it refers to sexual connotation, and this may be a reference to the disharmony of the marriage, or possibly a reference to the state of the groom's inability to perform. It's completely tasteless. All right, next we're going to go from one lusty painting to another. We moved just a few years later, we're still in the 18th century, to the court of none other than one of those great Louis XV, who helped usher into the style that I used to just loathe so profoundly, but I've, again, like Madame Bovary, I've kind of taken a little liking to it, the Rococo. And that art style is devoted to pleasure, to playfulness, to frivolity, to eroticism, to art of the French court. This is the time that Marie Antoinette follows Louis XV, but I mean, playing milkmaid and acting out all kinds of silly dramas. And we're looking at the famous Rococo painting, probably the most famous one, called The Swing, by the French artist Jean-Honoré Fragonard. And Fragonard took this on as a private commission by an aristocrat, are you ready, who asked for a painting of his mistress that included him looking up her skirt. No, seriously. And of course, that was subverting the societal norms at the time. And it's really fascinating because Fragonard was not the first artist asked for the commission, but the other artist had more sense, I guess. I don't know who's got the last laugh now, but he denied the patron, and so Fragonard thought, well, what the heck, I'll do it myself. And so from the outset, The Swing was meant to be erotic and sexually charged, and really too naughty to be shown anywhere but one's private boudoir or private little space in one's home. You would never show anything like this in public. It's frivolous. It's over the top on so many levels. This is not meant to be funny, but maybe you'll think it's funny. To me, it's like the visual equivalent of a Publix wedding cake, or a Publix birthday cake with all the frosting and the flowers and it's just over the top. So at first glance, we're treated to this tour de force of rapid fluid brushwork that helps heighten the drama of the setting, which is in this luxurious glade. It's not like in an open forest, or it's not in someone's formal garden, but this glade where nature is just erupting, exploding with foliage and wild roses, which all really underscore this idea that it's untamed desire, that's what's going on here, is this untamed desire. It's dramatically lit, and the soft light reinforces the sensuousness of the setting and the activities that are taking place. Now, also, there's plenty of secret goings on here, all happening right in front of our very eyes. And if you don't believe me, just look carefully at the Cupid on the far left, the sculpture of the Cupid, who's watching everything very carefully and giving us clues as to what our role is, and that is to be quiet and mind our own business. Now, can we go to the close-up, the next one, please? Thank you. So our eyes are immediately focused on the coquette, the mistress of the young man who's hiding in the ground there. She's swathed in pink taffeta and lace and ruffles. The stunning curves of her billowy dress are magnified. Her neck is adorned with a lovely bow, and that really is indicating her status as an object, right? She's an object of this man's desire, and of course, not to mention the legs wide open, and certainly the angle of her curved straw hat mimics the side of the young man's or her lover's hat. Again, another sexual phallic symbol that we see here. Now, swinging through the air, she's being pushed by an old geezer who, by the way, has throughout all of our history, 50 years ago, I learned this, that it was supposed to be an old bishop. And of course, it makes you wonder, why would an old bishop be pushing a girl on a swing? But apparently, this painting is at the Wallace Collection in London, and they cleaned it a couple of years ago, and they learned that, that he wasn't in black, which an old bishop would have been in a black outfit, and instead he's wearing a blue suit. And so it's now designated that the man pushing her is her cuckolded husband, her unaware husband, who has no idea that he has a competitor for her, for his wife's affection. And notice how Fragonard reveals just enough of her calves and her flesh to be scandalous, but the piece de resistance is the pink kitten slipper that she kicks off, often described as yet another phallic symbol, multiple, as I said. I used to have so much fun teaching young people things like this, and they would think, Miss Edelman, you just are so focused on sex. And I thought, yeah. Those were in the days before we had a lot of censorship in art, let's put it that way. And then you see her foot is also erect. And can you go back a second, Lisa? You're so good. You're so good. No, yeah. And you notice that his arm is also, and so it's kind of one line from, her foot to his erect arm. Now she is in on the ploy. So Cupid knows, and the young man knows, and the coquette knows, and she's enjoying every second of the deception. The young girl at the time, the aristocracy would play games like this in nature and get away with improper behavior, as Stacey would say. And then let's see. Can you move on? I'm afraid, no, I shouldn't even turn my neck after the last time. Okay, right here. And then there's another much younger man who commissioned the painting, as we said. He's strategically placed, hiding within a bed of wild roses. In fact, one of them just landed on his chest. And he's got the pinkest cheeks and a happy face. And they're due, obviously, because of his line of sight. Now, I had to throw in the pink. I looked for a pink kitten slipper. I love the name pink kitten slipper, and of course I love the name Manolo. And Manolo Blahnik did an art show. He did a showing of some of his older styles, and apparently at the Wallace collection a few years ago. And this was one of the shoes that was in the exhibit. Yeah, and so he loves the Wallace collection. So he was there and so forth. Okay, so
Isn't his arm too long?
It's just long enough.
it's long enough. I'm not an anatomy expert, Diana. I'm just an art lover.
Size matter.
Okay.
A little too long.
Okay. Well,
Okay, you have to
okay.
repeat in case they couldn't hear that in the back.
It's too long.
his arm.
Oh, yeah.
But then
Whatever. If we have a doctor here, that's one thing, but we don't. Okay, on the left of the painting, go one more, Lisa, if you would. Yeah, here we go. On the left of the painting, we find the all-knowing Cupid, which was based on a real sculpture that had been commissioned by Madame Pompadour, who was Louis XV's like the best mistress, because she had, she loved happy. She's a big art patron, and the Cupid that she commissioned was by an artist named Falconet, and a picture of this Cupid is a picture of cuteness. The real sculpture, and of course Fragonard's too, and it's you notice that Cupid's pointer finger is charmingly touching his lips, reminding us to be quiet during the secret encounter. And Fragonard turned the stone version of the adorable god into a creature who's loving every second, watching the intrigue. And here, as in the sculpture, Cupid reaches to pull out an arrow from his quiver. And according to the Khan Academy's scholar, Dr. Ashley Bruckbauer, she says that, quote, by showing the god facing the swinging woman as he makes this silencing gesture, Fragonard positions the two as confidants sharing a secret. The subject of their deception is quickly discovered hiding in the rose bushes below. His wide-eyed gaze and extended arm turn our attention to her exposed legs. And the layer of her skirt open like the petals. I love this analogy. She's saying that the petals of the blooming pink roses on the bush below is a visual connection that suggests her fertility. It rivals that of the garden. Isn't that beautiful? End of quote. But what is most humorous are on the other side. Can you go back to the main one, Lisa? I'm so sorry. I'm making you go. Oh, wait, stop. Yeah, that's fine. What is most humorous are on the other side. So you have this one side of this work, you've got the Cupid who's going, shh, keep a secret, would you? And then on the other side are these chubby naked cherubs that are known as putti, P-U-T-T-I, and they're riding atop a dolphin on the other side of the action, so to speak, and they seem to be a great deal more concerned for what was going on. In other words, these putti are supposed to be like the moral judges here of what's going on in the scene, and their expression, it seems to be so much more conservative as judgment-wise regarding female sexuality at this time. And then there's the little Bowser right by the foot of the no longer the bishop, the husband, and the dog is barking, and that's been equated with seeking attention. Of course, a dog being fidelity, representing fidelity, but also the barking equated with the attention seeking. And all I can say is this, in closing on this, that this painting gives new meaning to the word ménage à trois. Okay, next. Now we're taking a giant. Stacey, I know you're. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. We're taking a giant leap now from the 18th to the 20th century, with the greatest artist of the 20th century, Pablo Picasso, who once said this, quote, "Painting is another way of keeping a diary," end quote. And that's an understatement when it comes to our understanding of his art. And he also said this, which he said that women were either goddesses or doormats. So I mean, yeah, okay. Well, we'll see. That's what's going on here. So let's check out one of his most famous amorous relationships. Okay, it's January 8th, 1927, the year that 17-year-old Marie-Thérèse Voltaire, the gorgeous beauty on the right in the slide, 17, she was standing in front of the Galerie Lafayette, which is a department store in Paris, and who should stroll by but none other than the macho 45-year-old and married Pablo Picasso, married to the Russian ballerina Olga Koklova, who was, she danced with the Diaghilev Ballet, and her father was a colonel in the Russian Imperial Army, and she was very bourgeois,
My name is
Bovary, but Bovary, Flaubert protested. But anyway, 45-year-old Picasso says to 17-year-old Marie-Thérèse, quote, "You have an interesting face. I would love to do a portrait of you," end of quote. And then he says, "I am Picasso." And as fate would have it, she had no idea of who he was. So he took her to a bookstore. At least he didn't go right to the studio. He took her to a bookstore and showed her some of his drawings. And 3 days later, he told her that she saved his life. And this is why, because he was totally over his marriage, and for lots of reasons, and I don't want to, we have to keep going, but the point is that she was athletic, she was a rower, she was a gymnast, she was a biker, a swimmer, and for a while, like about 8 years, she was his muse and model, and really led him out of a rut. And when I show you the next slide, you'll see why. Some people think that this period in his art, aside from Les Demoiselles, aside from inventing Cubism and with Braque, and aside from Guernica of 1937. But anyway, I just wanted to show you a photo of Olga Koklova, because this is Picasso on the left. This work, The Head of a Woman, is supposed to be representative of Olga. And he made about 16 different paintings like this. This is also at the Metropolitan. They describe this work as, quote, a misshapen boomerang. I would call it just your basic monster. Picasso, it's a single black line, portrayed his wife, and with two different shaped eyes, a mouth with 4 sharp nails for teeth that would rip open anyone apart, and then 3 rather unflattering hairs. In real life, as I said, she was much more attractive to that, but according to Picasso, too bourgeois for him. Now, when Picasso did the series of heads that represent how he felt about his wife, he had already met Marie-Thérèse, and he must have been a real expert at juggling women, because Olga did not find out about Marie-Thérèse for 8 years. 8 years. He would take her when they would go on vacation. He would rent places for Marie-Thérèse, and she ultimately bore him a daughter, Maya. All right, let's go to the bombshell here, please. Can you? Thank you, Lisa. So I'm sure many of you have seen the Dream, or Le Rêve, painted in 1932. Once Picasso met Marie-Thérèse, he discarded the hard-edged lines and the angular shapes for this kind of sensual line that you see here. His love and his passion for her allowed him to change his approach to painting, essentially, and certainly a lot more curves. And she was curvy. Her body was curvy, and she was so feminine. She was so soft and sensuous and feminine, and certainly more voluptuous, these forms, and a lot more color and thicker paint. And of course, there's no mystery of who or what she is dreaming about. Hello, she's not a doormat. No, she is a goddess here in slumber, and her sexuality is on full display. And certainly, we don't need Freud for any analysis. Half of her head is his penis. Her hands form a vagina. As I used to say to my children, do I need to draw you a picture? Really. And scholars agree that these sensuous images were painted very quickly. The Dream apparently was painted in one afternoon. But of course, it's all about him. It was always all about him. So I have a love poem he wrote, but I'm going to skip it because for time's sake.
No, go ahead.
Oh, read it, please. Okay. It's very beautiful. It's kind of hard to believe it. Anyway, okay, he wrote this a few years after he painted Le Rêve. I love you more than the taste of your mouth, more than your look, more than your hands, more than your whole body, more and more and more and more than all my love you will ever be able to love. And I sign Picasso.
I think it's still all about him.
Oh, it's all, yeah, but the other thing, this painting has such an interesting provenance. You may already know this, but this painting was sold in 2013 for, are you ready, $155 million, making it one of the most expensive works of art that's ever been sold. And it was once owned by Steve Wynn of the casino fame. And it is Wynn who apparently has some kind of eye disease. And he was showing a group of celebrities this painting in his office. And he rammed his elbow, making a 6-inch tear, costing $90,000 to replace, but eventually he was able to sell it to some finance man. Anyway, okay, but let's go to the next one, please. Why are you shaking your head at me?
I just can't. That's a big mistake.
Yeah, no kidding. But all's well that ends well. Now, I really debated whether or not to show this sculpture because it's so to me, it's so brutal. And I have a quote from one of Picasso's granddaughter from the legitimate. He had, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 children by his different relationships. And this was from Olga's and Picasso's son, Paolo, the only legitimate child. So the granddaughter's named Marina, and she says that she curated a show of Picasso, and she speaks about his treatment of women, and I think it's very telling because it'll help for you to digest the sculpture because that's a lot to take. It says, quote, that his treatment of women was a dark phenomenon, a vital part of his creative process. He submitted them to his animal sexuality. He tamed them. He bewitched them. He ingested them. He crushed them onto his canvas. And after he spent many nights extracting their essence, once they were bled dry, he would dispose of them. So, is correct. He reduces Marie-Thérèse to this basic sex and sexuality. And even someone as the New Yorker, Blake Gopnik, who's an art critic, said this. He said that he brutalized her, and that's kind of reinforced by what Marina said. And we don't really. Let's just move on. But one thing to say about it, and it's the same theme, isn't it? His sexuality is really what is prominent here. He did make her mouth. She had a pretty mouth, and he sculpted the mouth. And this is a plaster work, by the way. And notice that, her breasts are just so, just really crude. I mean, it's just totally brutal, crude. The other thing in researching this, this was the same time that Matisse, they had a great rivalry. There's a really, really good book about their rivalry called Picasso and Matisse. Okay, it's pretty self-evident, but it's by Francois Gillot, who 2 women after Francois Gillot was his partner. There was one between Marie-Thérèse and Francois Gillot, and she wrote it. And you can see that they had this kind of, I couldn't call it love-hate, but they had this respect, they had a healthy respect for one another as artists, and I think that they also, there was a big show at MoMA a few years ago, Picasso and Matisse, and it was fascinating because it showed you what they were doing at the same time, and they often used each other as inspiration. So where was I going with that? Oh, so some people think that Picasso, he saw Matisse's sculptures of women, and Matisse's were much more. They were more organic and more beautiful. Yeah, they were more beautiful. That's an understatement. All right, if you weren't here last time, let's go to the next, please. I couldn't resist in showing Lust here with Nan Golden, who was our artist that we talked about, social activist, photographer. And what I would say about this is she loved to, focus on intimate scenes, and you've got these intertwined bodies here. One was raw, passionate, and electric, and the hands that are just quite just sensual and beautiful. The way this couple is enwrapped, it's very the closeness and the movement is really stunning. And let's go on. We're finishing up with the bed. I hate to ask people. Okay, so just as artists have done throughout the ages, during the late 80s, there was a group of young artists in Britain. They were called the YBAs, the Young British Artists. And you may recall this was the time that, again, you have another group of artists who are rejecting the norms. You know, they don't like what came before them. They don't like any rules, and they just want to do their own thing. And they, you know, and what they do at the time is seemed to be totally scandalous. Okay, kind of again like what Flaubert did. And so this is a group that they really were into the shock and awe of artistic expression. And this is the time where they were in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Museum when Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York. And you know, one of these artists, not the one we're going to be talking about, but one of them painted a painting, a huge painting of his version of the Virgin Mary. He happened to be Nigerian who had moved to London. His name was Chris Ofili, and he used elephant dung in the painting of the Virgin Mary. Well, you would have thought, you know, the earth had opened up or the Brooklyn Bridge had, you know, sunk or something. And he threatened to take the money, all their money away. But anyway, a judge had a cooler head and prevented that. But this group included Damien Hirst, who put animals in formaldehyde tanks. And anyway, and so we're going to be talking about Tracy Emin, who did things also just as wild and crazy. Her actual bed became an iconic example of an autobiographical, confessional self-portrait. And you know, why confessionals? Well, partly because Emin, and she's still living, but she's had so much heartache, medical issues and so forth in her life, but partly because she was sexually assaulted at 13, and then when she was 18 and beyond, she's had several abortions. And you know, she I mean, it's no secret she's a hard-living kind of gal. So before she decided to turn her bed into a work of art, she stitched a tent and entitled it "Everyone I've Ever Slept With." And it's a real tent, and the names of all these people, and it's not all men, because she did sleep with her grandmother, and as a grandmother, I found that kind of charming that she put her grandmother's name on the tent. And so it's not necessarily everyone that she had sex with. And she's such a contradiction in terms of she was once described as the enfant terrible of the YBAs, the Young British Artists, and in 2011 she became one of 2 women to become a professor at the Royal Academy in London. I mean, and the Royal Academy has been around since 1748, and I mean, they would never have, well, they have more now, but she was the first female drawing professor. So I want to just read a little quote from Roberta Smith, and can you just get to the bed, Lisa, because we're almost, here we go. So Roberta Smith, the lead critic of the New York Times, said this about Tracy Emin, quote, "In her art, she tells all," and that's no lie, I mean, she tells everything, "all the truths, both awful and wonderful, but mostly awful, about her life. Physical and psychic pain in the form of rejection, incest, rape, abortion, and sex with strangers figure in this tale, as do love, passion, and joy," end of quote. So in 1998, she spent several weeks in bed, drinking, smoking, eating. Can you imagine eating in bed? I mean, maybe you do. I just can't even imagine. Sleeping and having sexual intercourse in her bed, after which she experienced a period of severe emotional flux. That's a really nice way of saying she had a breakdown, because she had broken up with her boyfriend. When she finally arose, she looked at this giant mess, and she said, "Aha, I made this mess. I think I'm going to turn it into a work of art." Now, she's not the first person who user ready-made. We know who that was with his urinal, Marcel Duchamp, in the early 20th century. He got away with it too, he really did. But he really opened the door for all these other artists who, basically, he said anybody can be an artist and anything can be a work of art. And that was really important. So she got up and, she says she's going to turn this into an artistic statement. So what's all the fuss? Well, it's a truly disgusting, deeply intimate bed. It had pill packets and soil sanitary products and empty vodka bottles, used and unused condoms, half-squeezed KY jelly, blood-stained underwear, and so on, and even a pregnancy test. And so, was this bed a site of pleasure or a source of shame? That's for you to figure that. I'm not going to answer that, but was it a sign of self-doubt or abandonment? Calling it, quote, a residuum of a lost weekend, yet also intimating that the bed's occupant felt herself lost too, which is Rebecca Mead of the New Yorker. She's such a great writer on Britain. She went on to say that the bed, quote, bore the marks of blood, sweat, and most likely tears, end quote. And so we begin to appreciate the concept of what Emin accomplished. And so much contemporary art is about that, right? It's about the idea. Maybe you don't like the finished product, but what drove it is key. So as you can imagine, this bed provoked a great deal of comment, both critical and positive, and it was even exhibited at the Tate Britain with all those Turners, all those like naval scenes and landscapes, and and it's so hard to even reconcile that. And she was even nominated for the Turner Prize the next year. She didn't win. Steve McQueen, not the actor, but the artist, Steve McQueen won. So why should we care about her bed? It's a universal object. It's something we can all relate to. In her case, she decided to expose all the ugliness and pain of her life for all of us to contemplate, turning it into this confessional object, exposing the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, what did she accomplish? She created something really that was honest, that was direct, and deeply intimate. And so I was going to lead into Stacey by saying that let's reflect on the idea of our beds, but
we hope you reflected on your idea of the bed.
So we talk about how when it was finished it became this idea of female vulnerability, and I think that's a good way to kind of wrap everything up today. How does female vulnerability relate to lust? Well, Stacey's already, shall we say, given us a lot to contemplate on the subject, and we haven't thanked everybody. That you were going to do that, so you're going to thank everybody. Thank you.
So I want to thank you. We are grateful that you've chosen to spend your time here with us today, and also grateful for your patience. We'd also like to thank the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida, who allows us to meet in this beautiful space on the river. We also would like to thank our volunteers who do such a beautiful welcome for us.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you, volunteers.
Of course, our underwriters, Julia and John, and thank you also to every one of you who make the trek here downtown to be with us to discuss literature. It means so much to us.
When is the next one? Are you going to get to that?
It's right here.
I was worried you might not get to it.
I printed it out.
I thought
you said.
Okay.
Print it out. Now read from my printed remarks. We have reached the halfway point of our literature season. And there's probably many people in this room who are thrilled. Please mark your calendars for April 24th and May 15th, and please join us then. Thank you so much.